The plane landed under a leaden sky, and the engine's roar mingled with the muffled sound of the wind. The man hurried out, cell phone in hand, his head filled with deadlines, numbers, and victories that no longer meant much to him. 3 months out of the country, handling million-dollar deals, and now, finally, his return. In his chest, an anxious urgency to prove to himself that he had won. However, what awaited him was not the applause of success, but the echo of a silence that had long been growing without him noticing. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. The airport hums with its usual rush. People pass by like shadows, each carrying their baggage of dreams or despair. Richard Miller adjusted his Italian tie, his flawless $2,500 suit impeccable even after 12 hours of flight. At 42, he had learned to use success as armor. His cell phone didn't stop vibrating. Congratulatory messages for closed contracts, invitations to business dinners, numbers dancing on the screen like small numerical victories. But today there was something different in the air. An unease he couldn't quite name, as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis while he was away. Perhaps it was just travel fatigue, he thought, as he walked toward the parking garage. The private driver who always picked him up wasn't there. Strange. He pulled out his cell phone, dialed the number. Out of service. He frowned. For the first time in years, he'd have to drive himself home. The rental car smelled new. Artificial, nothing like the soft leather of his Mercedes, which must be in the climate-controlled garage of his mansion. As he left the airport, the city unfolded before him like a slow-motion movie. It was 3 in the afternoon on a Monday in March, and the heat stifled any desire to breathe deeply. Traffic crawled, horns honked for no reason, and he felt a growing irritation rising in his throat. At the first stoplight, his gaze escaped through the window. A woman pushed a stroller along the uneven sidewalk, the sun beating hard on her tired face. On the other side, a mid-aged man swept the front of a small workshop, his hands stained with grease, a wide smile for someone passing by. Everyday scenes he had forgotten to notice, lost between spreadsheets and presentations in air-conditioned conference rooms. The phone rang. It's Martha, his secretary. "Richard, so glad you made it. I've got a few pending issues here. Need to talk to you." "Go ahead, Martha." "Well, it's about your father." The world stopped. Literally. The light turned green, cars honked behind him, but Richard couldn't move his foot off the brake. "What about my father?" "We haven't been able to reach him. It's been a week. The woman who was taking care of him, she's gone too, and there was a strange call from the bank, something about the house." The words reached him as if from a great distance, through a dark tunnel. His father, 73 years old. When he left for the trip, the old man was fine, in the new house his stepmother had chosen, in a quieter neighborhood. Or at least that's what Richard thought, or what he wanted to think. "Did you try going there?" "Yes, I did. The house is closed up. Neighbors said they haven't seen him in a while." His heart raced. A strange feeling took hold of his chest, as if something important was slipping through his fingers. How long had it been since he'd talked to his father? A month? 2? The weeks blurred in his memory, all the same, all filled with urgent commitments that couldn't wait. "Martha, cancel everything today, absolutely everything." "But Richard, you have that investor meeting at 6. "Cancel it." He hung up the phone and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, something was more important than a meeting. The feeling was strange, almost uncomfortable. He made a U-turn at the first opportunity and headed towards the neighborhood where his father was supposed to be. The drive there was like a film playing in reverse. The wide, tree-lined streets of downtown gradually gave way to simpler constructions, row houses, small shops. The neighborhood where he grew up, which he once knew like the back of his hand, now seemed foreign. A lot had changed. New buildings where there used to be yards, large supermarkets where corner stores once operated. When he stopped in front of the house, his stomach clenched. Closed gate, dried plants, mail piled up in the box. He rang the doorbell. Nothing. He knocked on the gate. Silence. A neighbor, a woman in her 60s, appeared at the window of the house next door. "Hi, young man. Are you looking for Mr. Anthony?" "Yes, I am. Do you know where he is?" The woman glanced around as if afraid to say too much. "Well, son, I haven't seen him around here in a while. The woman who lived with him left about 2 months ago, took a bunch of stuff. After that, he seemed a little different." "Different how?" "Quieter, you know. He stopped tending the garden, hardly left the house. Then one day he just disappeared." The world blurred slightly. Richard felt his legs go weak. "You don't know where he went?" "No, I don't, son, but—" She hesitated as if reluctant to deliver bad news. "There were some men here last week from the real estate agency. They said the house was sold. Sold." The word echoed in his head like a discordant clang. Sold? How? He'd left money for expenses, had a joint account with his stepmother, specifically for these situations. What the hell had happened? "Do you have the real estate agency's phone number?" "Yes, I do. Hold on a minute." She returned with a crumpled card. Richard thanked her and went back to his car, his hands trembling slightly. He called the real estate agency. The agent confirmed. "House sold 2 months ago. Negotiated by the owner's wife, all legal, documentation in order." "Can I know where they moved?" he asked. "I don't have that information, sir. The lady only left a mailing address, but it's a P.O. box." Richard hung up and stood there, in the middle of the street, staring at the house where his father had lived. For the past 3 years, a house he himself had helped choose, small but comfortable, with a yard where the old man could plant his tomatoes and rose bushes. Now, a closed gate, a dead garden, silence. His cell phone rang again. Martha, probably wanting to confirm if he was really going to miss the meeting. But he didn't answer. For the first time in years, work could wait. Something more urgent was happening, something he should have noticed earlier, but which had been hidden beneath spreadsheets and million-dollar contracts. He decided to look for his stepmother, Lydia, a woman in her early 50s, whom his father had met at the senior center 2 years after becoming a widower. Richard had never really liked her. There was something calculating in the way she looked at things. But his father seemed happy, and that was enough, or should have been enough. He called the number he had for her, out of service. He searched social media, profile deactivated. It was as if she had simply evaporated, taking his father with her. The afternoon was fading, and a growing anguish took hold of his chest. He decided to go home, reorganize his thoughts, maybe hire a private investigator, but on the way, a strange force pulled him towards the city center, towards the bus station, the transit hub, the places where lost people often appear. It was almost by accident that he parked his car near the station plaza. The place was bustling, street vendors, people waiting for buses, others simply sitting on benches watching life go by. He walked along the sidewalk, his eyes searching for something he couldn't quite name, until he saw it. Behind the dumpsters near the terminal, a hunched figure rummaged through plastic bags. Trembling, hands, dirty clothes, a body too thin. It was just another one of the many homeless people he usually saw and pretended not to see when driving through the city. But there was something familiar in those gestures. His heart stopped. It couldn't be. He walked closer, slowly, his entire body tense. The man was turned away, rummaging through a bag, looking for scraps of food. The hands. Richard knew those hands. Hands that had taught him how to hold a pencil, that had fixed his bicycle, that had stroked his hair when he was a child. "Dad?" His voice, and came out hoarse, almost inaudible. The man turned slowly. A thin, bearded face, sunken eyes, but they were the same eyes, the eyes of the man who had raised him, who had worked double shifts so he could study, who had rejoiced in every one of his achievements as if they were his own victories. Anthony Miller looked at his son as if seeing a ghost. He tried to hide the dirty bag behind his body, wiped his hands on his torn shirt, as if he wanted to become invisible. "Richard." The voice was a whisper. The world spun. World. Everything Richard thought he knew about himself, about his life, about his success, collapsed like a house of cards. There, before him, was the only person who truly mattered, rummaging through trash, hungry, cold, abandoned by him. The man who had conquered the world had just discovered he'd lost what was most precious to him, and the night had barely begun. The silence that settled between them was heavy as a tombstone. Richard looked at his father as if he were seeing his own shattered soul. Anthony lowered his head, his hands trembling as he tried to organize the dirty bags beside his body. The sour smell of spoiled food mingled with the odor of sweat and grime, creating a reality that Richard's brain still refused to fully accept. "Dad, what?" His voice failed. How to ask? How to explain a 3-month absence that had turned into a lifetime of abandonment? Anthony slowly raised his eyes. There was something in that gaze that cut deeper than any blade. It wasn't anger. It wasn't resentment. It was resignation. The kind of weariness that comes from someone who has waited until they can't wait anymore. "Are you okay?" was all Richard could manage. His father smiled, a crooked, awkward smile as if apologizing for existing. "I'm fine, son, just passing through." A lie. They both knew it was a lie. But there was a painful dignity in the way Anthony tried to preserve something, perhaps the image his son had of him, perhaps his own sanity. Richard looked around. People hurrying by, cars honking, life continuing its normal rhythm while his world silently imploded. He noticed other people starting to look, to whisper. A well-dressed man talking to a homeless person. The scene drew attention. "Dad, let's get out of here. Let's go home." "What home, son?" The question was simple, but it pierced Richard like a bullet. What home indeed? His mansion, the downtown apartment. His father had never felt comfortable in those places, always behaving like a guest, always afraid of dirtying something, of being out of place. "Let's go to my apartment. You need to take a shower, grab a bite to eat." Anthony shook his head. "No need, my son. I know you have your life, your important things. I'm just happy to see you." The sentence hurt more than a shout. There was something in the humility of those words that made Richard want to cry, right there, on the dirty sidewalk, in front of everyone. His father was hungry, dirty, living on the street, and still worried about not being a bother. "Dad, for heaven's sake, let's go." This time his tone was firmer. He gently took his father's arm, felt the bones beneath the skin, the excessive thinness. Anthony hesitated, looking at the bags as if he were leaving a treasure behind. Can I take my things?" "Of course you can." They weren't things, really. They were leftovers. Crusts of stale bread, a plastic bottle with half-empty water, a piece of cardboard that probably served as a bed. But they were his possessions, and Richard understood he couldn't judge. He helped carry them, pretending it was natural, that he wasn't dying inside. The walk to the car was silent. His father walked slowly, dragging his feet, as if in no hurry to get anywhere. When they reached the vehicle, he stopped in front of the passenger door, unsure if he could get in. You can get in, Dad, but I'm dirty. It doesn't matter. Anthony got in carefully. As if afraid of breaking something, he huddled in the seat, hands crossed in his lap, looking out the window. Richard turned on the air conditioning, but the smell took a while to dissipate. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. During the drive, they tried to talk. "How are you, son?" "I'm fine, Dad. I closed some big contracts overseas." "That's good. I always knew you'd go far." "And you? How did you end up here?" His father took a while to answer. He kept looking at the houses through the window as if watching a film of a life that was no longer his. "Lydia, she said you called, said you didn't want anything to do with me anymore." The shock was physical. Richard almost lost control of the steering wheel. "I never said that. I know, son. I always knew. But she said so many things. She said you were ashamed of me, that you preferred I stay away. Then she sold the house, said it was your order." The pieces began to fit into the macabre puzzle. Lydia, the stepmother he'd never fully liked but tolerated because his father seemed happy. The plan was clear now. Isolate the old man, make him feel like a burden, sell everything and disappear with the money. "Dad, I never, ever said any of that. I left money in the account for you too. She closed the account too, said it was to spare you trouble." Richard pulled the car over at the first opportunity. He needed air, needed to think. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. 3 months he'd been away, tending to business, thinking he was building a better future, while his own father was systematically robbed and abandoned. "Why didn't you call me? Why didn't you look for me?" Anthony looked at his own hands, marked by time and labor. "I thought you really didn't want to. And then it got difficult. How was I supposed to call you and say I was on the street? A man my age. You'd be ashamed. Ashamed. Dad, I know you love me, son. I always knew. But I also know you have your world, your responsibilities. I didn't want to be a burden." A burden. The word echoed in Richard's head like a death knell. His father, the man who worked 2 shifts to pay for his education, who sold the only asset he had, a small workshop, to help him open his first business, thought he was a burden. The rest of the drive was done in silence, a heavy silence, full of unspoken things, of regrets that couldn't be put into words. When they arrived at the building, Richard hesitated. The doorman, Joe, always friendly, would find his father's appearance strange. But he had no choice. "Good evening, Mr. Miller. Everything all right?" "All good, Joe. This is my father." The doorman greeted them politely, but Richard noticed the look of surprise. In the elevator, his father became even more withdrawn, as if he wanted to disappear inside his own clothes. The apartment was exactly as he had left it, clean, organized, modern. Anthony stopped at the door, looking at everything with a mix of admiration and discomfort. "What a beautiful place, son. Make yourself at home, Dad. This is your place." But they both knew it wasn't true. That place had nothing of his father in it, no shared memories, no corner where he could truly feel at home. It was beautiful, it was expensive, but it was cold. Richard prepared a sandwich, warmed some milk, put it on a tray as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His father ate slowly, carefully, as if not wanting to make noise. Each bite seemed like an apology. "Dad, tomorrow we'll sort everything out. We'll go after Lydia. We'll get back what's yours." "No need to bother, son." "It's not a bother. It's my obligation." He prepared a bath, laid out clean clothes. When his father emerged from the bathroom, transformed, looking more like himself, Richard felt a mix of relief and guilt. How had he let it get to this point? How had he not noticed? That night, lying in the guest room bed he had never used, Anthony looked at the ceiling and whispered, "Thank you, God. Thank you for letting me see my son one more time." In the next room, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the last conversation he'd had with his father before the trip. A quick, rushed call, full of, "We'll talk better later." Later. Always later. Until there was no later. Now he needed to figure out how to rebuild a relationship he'd allowed to rot through neglect. He needed to figure out how to look into the eyes of a man he had failed in every possible way and who still loved him unconditionally. He needed to figure out how to forgive himself, if that was even possible. But one thing he knew, he wouldn't fail again. Never again. Dawn arrived slowly, filtered through the apartment curtains. Richard woke with a strange feeling, as if he'd slept in someone else's house. It took a few seconds to remember. His father was there, in the next room. Reality returned like a punch to the gut. He rose in silence, walked to the kitchen. The coffee was brewing when he heard shuffling footsteps. Anthony appeared at the door, hair combed, clean clothes that were too big for his thin body. He looked like a child wearing adult clothes. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, son. Did I wake up too early?" "Not at all. Want some coffee?" If it's no trouble. Always asking permission. Always apologizing for existing. Richard served 2 cups, put bread in the toaster. Simple gestures that gained weight when done in silence, loaded with everything they couldn't say. "Dad, today we're going to fix this. I'm calling my lawyer. We're going after Lydia." Anthony stirred his coffee slowly, watching the foam swirl. "Son, she must be long gone by now, and I don't want to cause you any trouble." "It's not trouble, Dad. It's justice." "Justice?" The old man repeated the word as if it were something foreign. "You know, son, at my age you learn that sometimes it's better to let things go. What's past is past." "But she stole from you, stole everything you had." "She took money, the house, those things, but she didn't take what really matters." Richard stopped, his cup halfway to his mouth. "What really matters?" "You, son, even when I thought I'd lost you too." The sentence floated in the air like a confession. Richard swallowed hard. For years he had built a financial empire, but he had never stopped to think about what truly had value. Numbers, contracts, investments, things that are built and then fall apart. But a father's love? That's different. That endures even when everything else crumbles. The phone rang. Martha, probably desperate about yesterday's cancelled appointments. "Richard, thank goodness. Where were you?" Everyone at the company was frantic, looking for you. "Martha, I need you to do something for me. Cancel everything this week, absolutely everything." "But Richard, you have the presentation for the Japanese on Thursday. You have—" "Martha, my father is sick. I'm going to take care of him." It wasn't a lie exactly. His father was indeed sick. Sick with abandonment, sick with loneliness, sick with being forgotten. These were illnesses no doctor diagnosed, but which killed slowly from within. After explaining the situation to Martha, without going into details, Richard called the law firm. Mr. Edwards, his lawyer for 10 years, agreed to meet with them in the afternoon. "Dad, let's go out for a bit, take a walk, talk." "Can I really?" "Of course you can. You're not a visitor, Dad. You're my father." They left together, walking slowly through the city streets. Anthony observed everything with curiosity, like someone rediscovering a place he thought he knew. They stopped at a park bench, near a bakery where Richard used to buy bread when he was a child. "Remember this bakery, Dad?" "I do. You always asked for that sweet bread with colorful sprinkles. And you always said it would spoil my lunch. But I bought it anyway." They laughed together. It was the first moment of lightness since they reunited. For a few moments they managed to forget everything that had happened and just be father and son, sitting on a bench, remembering better times. "Son, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Are you happy? The question was simple, but Richard took a while to answer. Happy? He had money, success, professional recognition. He had a beautiful apartment, an expensive car, a bank account that allowed for any luxury, but happiness? I don't know, Dad. I guess I'm a little lost. Lost how? I don't know what all this I've achieved is for. I work so hard, chase so much money, and for what? What's the point if in the end I'm alone? Anthony placed his hand on his son's shoulder, a calloused hand, marked by work, but still affectionate. You know what I learned those months on the street, son? What? That what's truly ours fits in a hug. The rest is just baggage. They remained silent, watching the activity in the park. Children playing, couples courting, old men playing chess. Life happening in slow motion, without haste, without urgency to be anywhere. That afternoon, at Mr. Edwards' office, the conversation was technical, cold. Documents, signatures, legal procedures. Anthony was a bit lost amidst so many legal terms, but Richard explained each step, translated every complicated word. Well, from what I see here, the lawyer said, adjusting his glasses, the situation is complex. Your stepmother used a power of attorney that your father had signed to carry out the transactions. Technically, everything was legal. Legal how? She disappeared with everything. Yes, but your father signed the documents, even if he was deceived, legally. Speaking, Mr. Edwards, Anthony interrupted, his voice low, I did sign them. She said it was to make things easier, to not trouble my son. Dad, you were tricked. That's a crime. Crime or not, the lawyer continued. We'll need to prove bad faith, gather evidence. It could take years. Richard felt anger rise in his throat. Years. Meanwhile, how many other elderly people were being deceived in the same way? How many fathers were sleeping on the streets because they trusted the wrong person? Let's move forward, he decided, even if it takes time. We'll go after her. Son, just let it go. I just want to be close to you. No, Dad, I won't let it slide. It's not just for you, it's for all the others she might be deceiving right now. The investigation began that same day. The lawyer hired a detective who discovered that Lydia had done this before, 3 times, always the same scheme: seek out lonely elderly men, gain their trust, isolate them from their families, steal everything, and disappear. It's a very elaborate modus operandi, the detective explained days later. She studies the victim, discovers their vulnerabilities, uses emotional neediness as a weapon. Richard listened to everything with a mix of disgust and morbid fascination. How could someone be so calculating? How could she look at a lonely old man and see only an opportunity for profit? Where is she now? Oakwood. She already has a new victim, an 80-year-old man, recently widowed. Let's stop her. Calm down, Richard. We have to do everything within the law. But Richard didn't want calm. He wanted justice. He wanted her to pay for every night his father went hungry, for every humiliation he had to face. In those days of investigation, the household routine changed. Anthony gradually lost his shyness, started to feel more at ease. He began to cook, simple, home-cooked food that filled the house with the smell of spices and affection. He started to tidy the balcony plants, which had been dying, small gestures that transformed the cold apartment into something more like a home. "Son, can I tell you something?" he said one night, as they watched television together. "Of course, Dad. These days here with you have been the best I've had in a long time, even with all this trouble with Lydia." Richard felt a pang in his chest. His father was thanking him for having a roof over his head, hot food, companionship, basic things that any son should ensure for his father, but which had become a gift because they had been denied for so long. "Dad, I'm the one who should be thanking you." "Thank me for what?" for giving me a second chance, for not hating me. Hate you? Son, you are my joy. You always have been, even when I thought I'd lost you. That night, Richard dreamed of his childhood. He dreamed of his father teaching him to ride a bicycle, of Sunday mornings in the workshop, of the smell of oil and rust mixed with coffee. He woke up knowing that he needed to recover not only the stolen money, but also the lost time. And this time, he wouldn't let anything or anyone interrupt. The trip to Oakwood was silent. Richard drove with concentration, his hands firm on the wheel, while his father observed the landscape through the window. Green fields stretched as far as the eye could see, punctuated by simple houses and farms. It was the kind of scenery Anthony had always appreciated, life happening without haste, without complication. "Are you sure you want to go, Dad?" "Yes, I am, son. I want to look her in the eye." "You don't have to say anything. Leave it to me." "No, Richard, I need to speak. Some things you need to say in person." The detective had located Lydia in a rented house downtown near the bus station. Strategic, always close to a quick exit, in case she needed to disappear again. She was living with her new target, a man named Oswald, owner of a small fleet of trucks. "Same scheme," the investigator had explained. "Gradual approach, gain trust, isolate from family." She'd already managed to get him to put her name on some accounts. Richard felt his stomach churn. How many other people like his father were being manipulated at this very moment? How many children would have to go through the humiliation of finding their parents on the street? They parked in front of the house. Simple construction, iron gate, well-maintained garden, an appearance of normality that concealed the rot within. "Now what?" Anthony asked. "Now we're going to talk to her." They rang the doorbell. A female voice answered through the intercom. "Who is it?" "Lydia, it's me, Richard, Anthony's son." Silence. Long silence. Then the sound of keys, locks being opened in a hurry. The door opened and she appeared. Early 50s, dyed hair, expensive clothes that didn't quite fit the simplicity of the house. Her face was the same, but there was something different in her eyes. A hardness that wasn't there before, or that she concealed better. "Richard, what a surprise." Surprise. His voice was sharp. "Where's my father's money?" "What money?" "Don't play. Dumb, Lydia. You sold the house, emptied the accounts, disappeared. Did you think we wouldn't find out?" She glanced over her shoulder, nervous. Her new boyfriend was probably home. "Listen, Richard, I can explain." "Then explain." "Not here. Let's talk outside." They went out onto the sidewalk. Lydia closed the door carefully, as if she didn't want the conversation to be overheard. "Look," she began, adopting a conciliatory tone. "I know it might seem strange, but I had my reasons. Your father, he was getting confused, forgetful. I thought it best to manage his money for him." "Manage?" Richard laughed without humor. "You disappeared. You left my father on the street." "I didn't leave him on the street. I had to travel, family issues, and when I came back he'd left the house." Lie. The voice was his father's. Anthony approached slowly, staring fixedly at Lydia. "You said my son didn't want to see me anymore. You said he told you to keep me away." "Anthony, dear." She tried an affectionate tone, but it sounded false. "You don't understand how things are. A rich son is ashamed of a poor father. It's normal." "My son was never ashamed of me." "Of course he was. Why do you think he never visited you? Why did he never take you to his fancy places?" Richard felt rage explode in his chest. "Stop lying. I never said any of that." "No? And why did you go 3 months without checking in? Why didn't you ask if your father was all right?" The question hit home. It was true. Richard had gone 3 months without calling, without caring. The guilt that was already gnawing at him found more ammunition in Lydia's words. "I was working. I thought he was fine with you." "Working?" she repeated sarcastically. Always working, always too busy for his own father. That doesn't give you the right to steal from him. I didn't steal anything. I took care of what was ours. I married him, remember? I had a right. You weren't married. Domestic partnership. It's the same thing. Anthony moved closer. There was a strange calm in him, a serenity that contrasted with the tension of the moment. Lydia, can I ask you a question? Of course, dear. Did you ever love me, even a little bit? The question caught everyone by surprise. Lydia hesitated, her closed-off face betraying the coldness she tried to hide. Of course I loved you, Anthony. I still do. Lie, he said without anger, merely stating a fact. You never loved me. To you, I was just a means to get money. Anthony, you're being unfair. Unfair is what you did to me. You tricked me, humiliated me, made me believe that my own son didn't want me. Tears began to stream down the old man's face. They weren't tears of anger, but of a deep sadness, the kind that comes from someone who has lost faith in people. You know what hurts the most, Lydia? It's not the money, it's not even the house. It's that you made me doubt my son's love. You made me believe I was a nuisance, a burden no one wanted to carry. Anthony, I spent entire nights on the street, cold, hungry, and what hurt most was thinking my son was ashamed of me. You planted that doubt in my heart, and that is unforgivable. Lydia looked around, noticing that some neighbors had started to take an interest in the conversation. A window opened, a curtain moved. She was losing control of the situation. Listen, you're making a scene. The neighbors... To hell with the neighbors, Richard said. Where's the money? What money? There isn't any money. The house was sold for $250,000. Where's the $250,000? Expenses, doctor, medicine, treatment. What treatment? Your father. He had problems. Drank a lot, became violent. My father never drank in his life. You don't know anything. You weren't here. The argument was turning into a shouting match. An elderly woman appeared at the window of the house next door, observing everything with curiosity. An elderly man stepped out of the house where Lydia lived. It must have been Oswald, the new victim. What's going on here? He asked, concerned. Lydia ran to him, adopting the role of victim. Oswald, dear, these men are threatening me. They say I stole money, but it's a lie. A lie? Richard approached. Sir, this woman is a con artist. She did the same thing to my father. She'll do it to you too. Don't believe them, Oswald. They're dangerous. Old Oswald looked from one to the other, confused. He was being put in a situation he didn't understand, forced to choose between a woman he loved and strangers making serious accusations. Sir, Anthony approached, his voice calm. Can I give you some advice? From one old man to another? Go ahead. Take care of your documents, don't sign anything she brings you, and call your children, tell them you're all right. Always. Anthony, stop this. Lydia intervened, nervous. Why? Afraid he'll discover the truth? The embarrassment was becoming too great. Neighbors started appearing at windows. Some came out onto the sidewalk. Lydia realized she needed to end the situation. Look, Richard, if you want this money so badly, I'll see what I can do, but not here, not like this. Give me a few days. A few days for you to disappear again. I won't disappear, I promise. Your promises aren't worth anything. Richard's phone rang. It was the detective. Richard, a new development here. I found 2 more of her victims, and one of them wants to press charges. The conversation was quick, but Lydia realized something had changed. The net was closing in. You'll regret this, she said, trying to maintain a dignified posture. The only one who'll regret it is you, Richard replied. They returned to the car in silence. Anthony seemed relieved, like someone who had finally said what he needed to say. How do you feel, Dad? Good, son. Better. Now she knows I found out who she really is. And do you think she'll return the money? I don't know, but it doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is that you know the truth, and I know you love me." Richard looked at his father in the rearview mirror. There was a peace on his face that hadn't been there before, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, as if an old wound had finally begun to heal. The drive back was lighter. They talked about simple things, the weather, the scenery, plans for the week. But there was something different in the air, a lost camaraderie, a trust that had been rebuilt brick by brick. When they arrived home, Richard was sure of one thing. No matter what happened with the money, with justice, with Lydia, they would stay together. And this time, nothing and no one would separate them again. The next few days passed in a strange, almost unreal routine. Richard cancelled meetings, postponed commitments, ignored urgent calls from the company. For the first time in years, something was more important than business. The investigation against Lydia and, especially, the reconstruction of his relationship with his father. Anthony gradually gained confidence in the house. He began to reorganize the kitchen in a way that worked better for him, bought spices Richard didn't even know existed, filled the balcony with plants that transformed the sterile apartment into something more like a home. These were small, quiet changes, but they made all the difference. "Son, can I do some grocery shopping?" he asked one Thursday morning. "Of course, Dad. Want me to come along?" "No need. I just want to go to the corner store, buy a few things for lunch." Richard hesitated. There was still an irrational fear that his father would leave and not return, as if everything were a dream from which he could wake at any moment. But he understood he needed to trust, that he couldn't turn care into a cage. "Take the spare key, and my card." "No need for a card, son. I have some change here." Some change. The humility of those words still scraped at Richard's heart. A man who had worked his whole life, who had built a workshop with his own hands, who had raised a son alone after his wife died, now spoke of some change as if it were a gift. "Dad, take the card. From now on, everything that's mine is yours too." Anthony accepted the card with embarrassment, like someone receiving charity. It would still take time for him to truly feel at home, to understand that he didn't need to ask permission to exist. Alone in the apartment, Richard took the opportunity to call the law firm. Mr. Edwards had news. "Richard, the situation is more complex than we imagined. The detective managed to track at least 5 victims in the last 3 years. Always the same pattern." "And Lydia? Did they manage to arrest her?" "Not yet. She's smart, always keeps things in a grey area. Technically, your father signed the documents. Proving coercion will be difficult. But she lied to him, manipulated, deceived." "I know, Richard, but the legal system requires concrete evidence, witnesses, documents, recordings." "And the other victims?" "That's the good news. One of them, Mr. Bernard, recorded some conversations. In them, Lydia admits she made up stories about his family to isolate him. That could be the key to the case. A hope, small but real." Richard felt relief, mixed with growing anger. How many families had been destroyed by people like Lydia? How many children had to carry the guilt of an abandonment that wasn't even real? His father returned from the market loaded with bags, his face animated. "I bought some delicious things for lunch. I'm going to make that chicken stew you liked when you were little. I remember, with sweet potato. With sweet potato." Cooking together became a ritual of reconnection. Richard peeled the potatoes while his father seasoned the chicken. Simple gestures that carried decades of history. The apartment filled with childhood smells, with memories that were stored somewhere in his soul. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "How did you endure it? On the street, alone, without knowing about me?" Anthony stopped stirring the seasoning, looked at his own hands. You know, son, there were times I thought about giving up. Nights when it was so cold I thought, Anthony, it's better if you just go to sleep and don't wake up. But then a memory of you would come from when you were little and I'd think, no, not yet, not yet. What kind of memory? Oh, many. You learning to tie your shoes, you helping me in the workshop, you hugging me when you came home from school. Good memories that gave me strength to endure another day. Richard felt his eyes well up. While he was in meetings in New York, talking about millions, his father was on the street, feeding on memories so he wouldn't freeze to death. Dad, I'm so sorry, I truly am. For what, son? For leaving you alone, for not realizing what was happening. You didn't know. No one could have known. But I should have been suspicious, should have called more, visited more. Anthony approached, placed his hands on his son's shoulders. Richard, listen, you can spend the rest of your life blaming yourself for the past, or you can enjoy the time we have now. Which do you prefer? The question was simple, but it carried a profound wisdom. Richard looked into his father's eyes and saw something he hadn't expected. Forgiveness. Not the forgiveness that is asked for, but the one freely offered, without conditions, without demands. I prefer to enjoy it, Dad. Then let's enjoy it. And let's make this chicken, it's getting delicious. Lunch was silent, but comfortable. The kind of silence that only exists between people who have known each other for a long time, who don't need to speak to understand each other. After eating, they sat on the balcony, drinking coffee, watching the street activity. Son, can I tell you something? Of course. These days here with you have been the best I've had in a long time. Even with all this trouble with Lydia, even with all this confusion, knowing that you love me, that you're not ashamed of me, that's worth more than any money. Dad, I'll never be ashamed of you. Never. I know, son. Now I know. The phone rang. Mr. Edwards with more news. Richard, we have an important development. The state police in Oakwood arrested Lydia. Mr. Bernard gave a statement and the recordings were accepted as evidence. Arrested? How so? She tried to pull the same scam on Mr. Oswald. She got him to sign a power of attorney to sell a truck. But this time he got suspicious because of the conversation you had and went straight to the police. Richard felt a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Justice. Finally. And now? Now she'll face charges for fraud, racketeering and embezzlement. The chances of recovering at least part of the money are good. Dad! Richard turned to Anthony, who had been observing the conversation in silence. They arrested Lydia. His father smiled, but it was a smile without resentment. I'm happy, son. Not for her, but for the other people she won't be able to deceive. Always thinking of others, always concerned about who might get hurt. That's how his father was, and Richard understood he would never be able to change that. Nor should he try. That night, they prepared dinner together again. Richard told stories about work, trips he had taken, people he had met. His father listened to everything with genuine interest, asked questions, laughed at the right moments. It was as if the years of distance were being filled with words, with attention, with present time. Son, can I ask you a favor? Anything, Dad. I don't want to live far from you anymore. No matter what happens with the money, with the house, with anything, I want to stay close. You're not far, Dad. You're right here at home. But when all this passes, you'll go back to your normal life, meetings, trips. No, Dad. Normal life now is the two of us. The rest is just work. Anthony smiled, a smile from someone who finally believed he wouldn't be abandoned again. You know what makes me happiest, son? What? It's not knowing I'll have food every day or a roof over my head. It's knowing I'll have you. That when I wake up in the morning, you'll be there. That when I go to sleep at night, I won't be alone. Richard swallowed hard. The simplicity of those words contained a love so pure it hurt. His father didn't want luxury, didn't want comfort, didn't want wealth. He just wanted not to be alone. He wanted his son's presence. "You'll always have it, Dad. Always." And for the first time since they reunited, Richard was absolutely sure he would keep that promise. No matter what happened, no matter what work came up, what opportunity arose, nothing would be important enough to make him abandon his father again. Nothing. A week after Lydia's arrest, the routine in Richard's house took on a rhythm of its own, more human. Mornings began with coffee brewed by his father, who had discovered a particular way to get the drink just right. Neither too strong nor too weak. Small rituals that transformed ordinary hours into moments of silent affection. Anthony still woke early, an old habit of someone who had worked his whole life. He watered the plants on the balcony, tidied the kitchen, prepared coffee like someone with all the time in the world. When Richard appeared, half asleep, he always found the table set and his father's discreet smile. "Good morning, son." "Good morning, Dad. Sleep well?" "Like a king." It was always the same answer. Like a king. As if sleeping in a warm bed, in a safe place, were a royal privilege. And perhaps it was. On this particular morning, as they drank coffee, Richard noticed his father was quieter than usual. He stirred his sugar too slowly, looked out the window with a distant air. "Is everything all right, Dad?" "Yes, son, I was just thinking about something." "About what?" "The workshop. I miss the sound of tools, the smell of oil, fixing things." Richard had never thought about that. For years, his father had a small workshop where he repaired everything from appliances to bicycles. It was the place where he felt useful, where his calloused hands had purpose. After he sold everything to help Richard open his first business, he never touched a tool again. "Do you miss it?" "Oh, I do. Not for the workshop itself, but, you know, son, a man my age needs to feel useful, needs to have something to do with his hands." The sentence hung in the air like a subtle request. Richard understood that his father wasn't complaining, wasn't demanding. He was just sharing a longing, exposing a need he might not even have known he had. "Dad, how about we set up a small workshop here, in the utility room?" "Here, in this nice apartment? Why not? It's your home too. But it'll make noise, it'll get dirty." "So what? A home is for living, not for being a museum." Anthony smiled, a timid smile from someone who didn't want to dream too big for fear of disappointment. "Are you serious?" "Of course I am. How about we go out today and buy some tools?" His father's face lit up like a child's on Christmas morning. It was the first time since they reunited that Richard had seen that kind of genuine joy in his eyes. They spent the morning visiting tool and hardware stores. Anthony examined each piece with the affection of someone reuniting with old friends. His hands, which had lost their steadiness lately, seemed to come alive again when they touched a wrench, a drill, a pair of pliers. "This one's good, son. German brand lasts a lifetime. Then take it. But it's expensive. Dad, for goodness sake, just take it." They returned home laden with bags, tools, a small workbench, organizers for screws and nuts. Richard watched his father unwrap each item as if setting up an altar. There was a reverence in those gestures, an almost religious respect for the tools of the trade. "Can I start organizing today?" "You can do whatever you want, Dad. This is your home." While Anthony dedicated himself to organizing the new workshop, Richard took the opportunity to sort out his professional life. Unreturned calls, accumulated emails, postponed meetings. Martha was almost freaking out with the messy schedule, but he managed to reorganize the most urgent matters. "Richard, can I ask you something?" Martha said during one of the calls. "Of course. Are you okay? You seem different." Different how? More, I don't know, calmer, less anxious. Richard laughed. It was funny how people noticed changes you didn't even realize you were making. I guess I'm learning to separate what's urgent from what's important, Martha. And what's the difference? Urgent is what shouts loudest. Important is what makes a difference in your life. He hung up the phone and walked to the utility room, where his father was finishing installing the workbench. The space, which used to be just for storing cleaning supplies, now looked like a workshop. Tools organized by size and function, a small vise clamped to the bench, a lamp directed to illuminate the work. It's perfect, Dad. Now we just need something to fix. As if in response from the universe, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Helen, the neighbor from the apartment next door. Hi, Richard. Sorry to bother you, but do you know anyone who fixes fans? Mine stopped working. Richard looked at his father, who was already getting up from the workbench. Yes, I do, Mrs. Helen. My father. Anthony took the fan as if receiving a gift. He examined it carefully, shaking his head, knowing the problem even before opening it. Bearing. Simple thing. In half an hour, the fan was working like new. Mrs. Helen was delighted, insisted on paying, but Anthony refused. Don't mention it, Mrs. Helen. It was a pleasure. Then at least accept a cake I made today. News of the repairman spread through the building with impressive speed. By late afternoon, there was already a small line of appliances on the workbench, a toaster, a blender, an old radio that hadn't worked in years. Dad, you've become a celebrity. Oh, son, people just need someone who cares about fixing things instead of throwing them away. It's a simple but profound philosophy. In an age where everything is disposable, Anthony represented a generation that believed in the power of repair, restoration, a second chance. Exactly what he and Richard were doing with their own relationship. That night, during dinner, the phone rang, Mr. Edwards, with news about the case. Richard, we have a proposal from Lydia's defense. She wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? She'll return the money in exchange for reduced charges. Richard looked at his father, who was following the conversation in silence. How much is she offering? 80% of the value, 190,000 out of 250,000. It was a good offer, better than expected considering the money could have disappeared completely. What do you think, Dad? What do I think about what? The deal. Is it worth accepting? Anthony thought for a moment, stirring his coffee slowly. Son, I just don't want her to do this to anyone else. If the deal guarantees that, accept it. But it's your decision, Dad. It's your money. No, Richard. Now it's our money. Our decision. The word "our" resonated in the room like a declaration of unity. It wasn't just about the money. It was about everything. Decisions, responsibilities, life. Everything divided. Everything shared. Then we'll accept, Richard decided. Mr. Edwards, you can finalize the agreement. Perfect. I'll prepare the paperwork. After the call, they sat in silence, processing the news. It was a relief, a closure, but also a milestone. From now on, the past truly was behind them. Son, can I tell you something? You always can, Dad. When I was on the street, I often thought about what it would be like if I died there, if you would ever know what happened to me. Dad, let me finish. I didn't think about it with anger or bitterness. I thought about it with sadness. Sadness at leaving without having the chance to tell you how proud I am of you. Richard felt his throat tighten. Proud? But Dad, I abandoned you. I left you high and dry when you needed me most. No, son, you gave me the greatest joy of my life, seeing that you became a successful man. And now you've given me the second greatest, discovering that, deep down, you're still the boy I raised. Good-hearted, strong character. Success hasn't changed that. How can you be so sure? Because you came looking for me, because you brought me home, because you set up a workshop for me to feel useful. A bad son doesn't do those things. That night, Richard went to sleep with a feeling of lightness he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, since he became an adult, he felt he was in the right place, doing the right thing. Professional success remained important, but now it had perspective. It was a means to an end, not the end in itself. And in the makeshift workshop in the utility room, Anthony worked late, fixing an old television that Mrs. Helen had brought over, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed it, because he had rediscovered the pleasure of seeing things work, of giving new life to what seemed lost, just like his own life, just like his relationship with his son. 2 months later, life had settled into a routine Richard never imagined possible. Waking up was no longer a race against the clock, but a moment of connection. Breakfast had become a sacred ritual where father and son connected before facing the day. The workshop in the utility room had become a pilgrimage site for the entire building. Anthony fixed everything, from old appliances to broken children's toys. He adamantly refused payment, but gladly accepted the pies, cakes, and dishes of food that the neighbors insisted on bringing as thanks. "Dad, you've become a celebrity in the building," Richard joked one Saturday morning, seeing the line of appliances waiting for repair. "Oh, son, it's just that people have lost the habit of fixing things. Everything today is throw it away and buy new. But old things were made to last." "Just like people," Richard smiled. "Just like people." There was a simple wisdom in this philosophy that went beyond broken appliances. Richard began to apply the same logic to his own life. Instead of discarding relationships at the first difficulty, he tried to fix them. Instead of firing employees for every mistake, he invested in their development. The company, surprisingly, only improved. "Martha, can you schedule a meeting with the whole team for Monday?" he asked during a call. "Any problems, Richard?" "No, I want to implement some changes. Good things." On Monday, Richard presented a project he had been developing for weeks, a quality-of-life program for employees with flexible hours, elder care assistance, and a more humanized career path. "Boss, can I ask a question?" said Charles, the financial manager. "Where did this idea come from?" "From home, Charles. I learned that caring for people is the best investment there is." The change in the company was gradual, but noticeable. The atmosphere became lighter, more collaborative. People worked better when they felt valued as human beings, not just as resources. Richard discovered that being a good boss started with being a good son. At home, the dynamic also evolved. Anthony gradually lost his shyness, truly feeling like the owner of the space. He reorganized the kitchen in a way that facilitated his work, bought new plants for the balcony, even suggested changes in the decor. "Son, how about we take that painting down and put up a bookshelf there?" "Of course." "Dad, the house is yours too." "Ours," he corrected, smiling. "Ours." One afternoon, while Anthony was fixing an old sewing machine for Mrs. Carroll from the 8th floor, Richard received an unexpected call. It was Mr. Edwards, but this time it wasn't about Lydia's case. "Richard, I received an interesting call today. A journalist wants to do a story about your father." "What do you mean?" "It seems the story has spread. A successful businessman who found his father living on the street, the case of the con artist who deceived the elderly. It sparked media interest." Richard felt a chill in his stomach. The last thing he wanted was to expose his father, to turn their pain into a spectacle for public consumption. "I'm not interested, Mr. Edwards." "Wait, Richard, let me finish. The journalist said the story would be about elder abandonment, about how important family is. It would be a way to warn other people, to prevent other fathers from going through what yours did. The perspective changed everything. It wouldn't be about them specifically, but about a larger social problem. Richard consulted his father. "What do you think, Dad? Is it worth talking about? Anthony stopped working on the sewing machine, wiped his hands on a cloth, pondered. You know, son, if our story can prevent any father from going hungry on the street, it's worth telling. But it will be difficult. They'll ask questions. They'll want details. It's okay. The truth doesn't hurt when you're at peace with it. The interview was recorded at home on the balcony, among the plants Anthony lovingly cared for. The journalist, a mid-aged man named Frank, had a respectful, sensitive approach. How did you feel when you found your father in that situation? He asked Richard. I felt like my whole life had been a lie. I thought I was building something important, but in reality I was destroying what mattered most. And you, Anthony, what was it like being on the street? It was tough. Not because of the hunger, not because of the cold. It was tough to think my son didn't want me around anymore. But he didn't know what was happening. I know that now. At the time, it was hard to believe. The journalist asked questions about Lydia, about the scam, about how other families could protect themselves. Anthony answered with simplicity, without resentment, like someone telling a story that no longer hurt. What's the lesson you take from all this? Was the final question. Father and son looked at each other before answering. That time is the only thing you can't recover, Richard said. Money comes back, a house can be rebuilt, but lost time, that never returns. And that a child's love is like breathing, Anthony added. You only realize it's important when it's missing. The story aired on a Thursday in the local newspaper. It was respectful, well-researched, focused on the social problem of elder abandonment. Richard and Anthony appeared as an example of reconciliation, of overcoming adversity. The repercussions were immediate. Calls from other families who had gone through similar situations. People wanting to know how to report con artists. Children calling their parents after months of no contact. Look, Dad, Richard said, reading comments online. A lady here says she called her father after seeing the story. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. That's good, son. It's worth the exposure if at least one family makes amends because of it. The following week, Mrs. Helen herself knocked on the door with a different request. Anthony, do you know anyone who can check on my father? He's getting forgetful, and I'm afraid someone might take advantage of him. Of course, Mrs. Helen. Bring him over to our place for coffee. That's how Richard's home became a reference point for families with vulnerable elderly members. Not officially, not as an NGO or a business, simply as a place where people knew they would find welcome, guidance, a willing ear. Anthony naturally assumed the role of counselor. His experience on the street paradoxically qualified him to guide other families. He knew, like few others, what it was to feel abandoned, discarded, and he also knew what it was like to be reborn when someone extended a hand. Son, I've been thinking about something, he said during Sunday dinner. About what, Dad? How about we formalize this help, create something official? What do you mean? An association, a project, I don't know, to help other fathers, other families. We have experience, we have resources. Richard chewed slowly, thinking. The idea made sense. They had the story, they had credibility, they had financial resources, and most importantly, they had the real motivation of someone who had been through the problem. It would be a big undertaking, Dad. Setting up a structure, hiring people, creating projects. I know. But it would also be a way to give meaning to everything that happened, to transform our pain into something useful for other people. Richard looked at his father and saw a determination he hadn't expected. Anthony didn't just want to live comfortably for the rest of his life. He wanted to contribute. He wanted to leave a legacy. You know what, Dad? We're going to do it. Seriously? Seriously. You take care of the human side. I'll take care of the bureaucratic side. Anthony smiled, a wide smile that lit up his entire face. Son, there's one more thing I want to tell you. Go ahead, Dad. Thank you. For what? For letting me be useful again. For giving me the chance to transform what happened to me into something good for other people. That's the best thing that could happen in my life. That night, while Anthony worked in the makeshift workshop, fixing an old record player someone had brought, Richard stayed on the balcony, mentally planning the project they would create together. For the first time in a long time, he felt that his life had a purpose that went beyond personal success. A purpose that connected past, present, and future in a line of meaning that finally made sense. And at the center of it all, the peaceful presence of his father, working with his hands, whistling an old tune, living each moment as if it were a gift. Because that's exactly what it was. 6 months after the decision to create the project, the Generations Bridge Association was operating out of a small commercial office 2 blocks from the apartment. The name was his father's idea, a bridge connecting generations, bringing children and parents closer, rebuilding bonds broken by time and haste. Richard handled all the legal and financial aspects, bylaws, registration, business plan, fundraising. Anthony took on what he did best, talking to people, listening to stories, offering a shoulder and advice from someone who had been through everything. "Good morning, Mr. Anthony," greeted Mrs. Mary, a 70-year-old woman who came to the project through a neighbor's recommendation. "Good morning, Mrs. Mary. How are you feeling today?" "Better. Yesterday I talked to my daughter, first time in 3 months. And how was it?" "Difficult, but necessary. She apologized for not calling for so long." Anthony smiled. Each reconciliation was a small victory, a reminder that the work was worth it. In 6 months, the association had already mediated over 50 cases. Children who reconnected with parents, families reunited after years of estrangement, elderly people protected from con artists. Richard always arrived in the late afternoon, after work at the company. He'd find his father talking to someone, or organizing informative materials, or simply having coffee with someone who needed companionship that day. "How was your day, Dad?" "Good, son. A gentleman came in today, Mr. Joe. 3 children, all well off, and none of them have called him in over a year." "So?" "I talked to him, got his children's phone numbers. I'll call them tomorrow." "You're going to call? Don't you think it's better to advise him to call?" "Son, sometimes pride is greater than love. Someone needs to take the first step, even if it's not the one who should." It was the practical wisdom of someone who understood that the important thing wasn't who was right, but that people reconnected. Anthony became an expert at dissolving pride, at finding words that crossed the barriers time built between people. One Thursday afternoon, they received an unexpected visit. An elegant, well-dressed woman, accompanied by a teenager. "Good afternoon. Are you in charge of the association?" "Yes, we are," Richard replied. "How can we help you?" "My name is Clara. I saw the report about you and, well, I need help." They sat in the small counseling room. Clara told her story. A successful executive, divorced, an only child. Her father, a widower for 5 years, lived alone in a large house, refusing to accept help. "He keeps making up excuses not to let me visit. Says he's fine, that he doesn't need anything, but I know he's isolating himself more and more." "And this young lady?" Anthony asked, looking kindly at the teenager. "She's my daughter, Julie, his granddaughter. He adores her, but he doesn't let her go there either." "Why?" "Says teenagers have better things to do than hang out with an annoying old man." Anthony and Richard exchanged glances. It was the same pattern they knew well. The elder who sabotaged himself, who pushed family away because he thought he was a nuisance, a burden, an inconvenience. "Can I say something?" Julie spoke up for the first time. "Of course, dear," Anthony encouraged. I love my grandpa. He taught me to play chess, to make kites, a bunch of things. I don't understand why he doesn't want to see me anymore. He does, dear. He just doesn't know how to ask. Anthony stood up, grabbed a chair, and sat beside the girl. You know, Julie, sometimes when you get old, you start to think no one needs you anymore, that you're just a problem for the people you love. But that's nonsense. It is nonsense, but we believe it. And when you believe something, no matter how silly, it becomes real to you. And how do I show him that I want to be close? By showing up. Simple as that. Don't ask permission, don't ask if you can. Just show up, with a cake, with a game, with any excuse. What if he gets angry? Deep down he'll be happy, very happy. Clara listened to the conversation with tear-filled eyes. It was exactly what she needed to hear, what she perhaps always knew, but didn't have the courage to admit. You really think that's all it is? Just showing up? It's not just showing up, Richard clarified. It's consistently showing up, every week on the same day at the same time, until he understands he can count on it. How do you know it will work? Because it worked for us, Anthony said. My son found me on the street, literally. And even then it took me a while to believe he really wanted me around. And did it work? Look around. Richard smiled. We're here together, working together, building something together. If it worked, for us who hit rock bottom, it can work for any family. They scheduled a visit for the following week. Clara and Julie would show up at their grandfather's house on a Saturday afternoon, unannounced, with the excuse that they were passing by and decided to drop in. Mr. Anthony, Julie said before leaving, can I ask a question? Of course, dear. How did your son find you? By luck, or by destiny, or because God wanted us to meet? No, the girl shook her head. How did he recognize you after so much time among so many people? Anthony paused, thoughtful. It was a question he himself had never asked, but which made perfect sense. You know, Julie, I think a child recognizes a parent, and a parent recognizes a child, no matter how much time passes, no matter the circumstances. It's something that comes from within that doesn't need eyes to see. Like love. Just like love. That night, after everyone left, father and son stayed to tidy the room, put away materials, preparing the space for the next day. Son, can I tell you something? You always can, Dad. Today, talking to that girl, I remembered when you were little, the questions you asked, the way you saw the world. And I realized that deep down, you're still the same. Curious, concerned about others, wanting to fix what's broken. I learned that from you, Dad. And I'm learning from you. What? That it's never too late to start over. That we can turn mistakes into corrections, pain into healing, loss into reunion. Richard stopped organizing the chairs and looked at his father. You know what impresses me most about this whole story? What? It's that we started trying to solve a problem of our own and ended up discovering that a lot of people are going through the same thing. It's that shared pain turns into healing, son, and multiplied healing turns into hope. They left the building where the association was located together. The night was peaceful, the streets illuminated by the yellow glow of streetlights. They walked slowly, without haste, savoring the end of another day of working together. Dad, are you happy? Son, I didn't even remember what it felt like to be happy anymore. Now I remember every day, even after everything you went through, even after the street, the hunger, the loneliness. Because of all that, Richard, if I hadn't gone through that, we never would have truly found each other. We never would have built what we're building now. You're not angry about anything? About Lydia? About me for taking so long to look for you? Son, anger is a poison you drink, hoping the other person dies. I prefer to use that energy to build something good. They arrived home and found a message on the answering machine. It was Clara, excited. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to tell you it worked. We went to Dad's. Today, he pretended to be mad that we showed up unannounced, but I could tell he was happy. Julie already scheduled for us to come back next Saturday. Thank you so much for everything. Father and son looked at each other and smiled. Another family reunited. Richard celebrated. Another bridge built. Anthony completed. And so, bridge by bridge, family by family, they were rebuilding not only their own lives, but also a small corner of the world around them. 1 year later, Sunday morning began as all mornings now did, with the smell of coffee brewed by his father and the low sound of the television in the living room. Richard woke without haste, stretched in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of the house that had truly become a home. When he reached the kitchen, he found Anthony reading the newspaper, glasses on the tip of his nose, a concentrated expression. "Good morning, Dad." "Good morning, son. Sleep well? Like a king?" They both laughed. The answer that used to be only his father's was now shared, transforming into an inside joke, a code of affection between them. What's interesting in the paper? "Oh, it talks about the association here, a story about the city's social projects." Richard leaned closer to read over his shoulder. It was a special section on the non-profit sector, and Generations Bridge was featured prominently, with a photo of its small headquarters and impressive numbers, over 200 families served, an 80% reconciliation rate, expansion into 2 other cities. "We're famous, Dad." "Not famous, son. Useful." The distinction was important to Anthony. He didn't want fame, didn't seek recognition. He just wanted to know that their work made a difference, that each day at the association resulted in a more united family, an elderly person less lonely. The phone rang. It was Julie, the girl they had met a few months ago. "Hello, Mr. Anthony. It's Julie." "Hi, dear. How's Grandpa doing?" "He's great. He even wants to talk to you." There was the sound of the phone being passed, voices in the background, laughter. "Hello? Anthony?" "Yes, sir. This is Nathan, Julie's grandpa. I wanted to thank you for what you did." "Don't mention it, Mr. Nathan. We didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did. You gave me back my granddaughter. Now she comes here every Saturday, brings her friends. The house has come alive again." "I'm very happy to hear that. And you know what else? My daughter is moving closer. Said she wants to be closer to the family." Anthony smiled, giving Richard a thumbs up. Another victory, another bridge successfully built. After the call, they prepared lunch together. It had become a Sunday ritual, cooking without rush, talking about the week, planning the days ahead. Richard learned to peel potatoes without haste, to season the chicken just the way his father liked it, to find pleasure in the simple gestures of cooking. "Son, remember when you said you didn't know what all the success you had achieved was for?" "I remember. Did you find out?" Richard stopped stirring the sauce, thinking about the question. "Yes, I did, Dad. It serves for this, for us to have time, to have resources, to have the structure to help other families. It serves to transform money into well-being, success into service. And are you happy with that? Happier than when I was just making money. Why? Because now success has a face. It has a name. It has a story. Every family we help reunite is a victory you can see, you can feel." Anthony hugged his son from behind, a rare, affectionate gesture. "I'm proud of you, Richard. I should be the one who's proud. You taught me all this." "No, son. You already knew. You were just lost amidst so much. Sometimes you need to get lost to truly find yourself." In the afternoon, They visited the association. Even though Sunday was a day off, someone always showed up needing to talk, needing guidance. The door was never completely closed to those in need. Today was different. They found a small crowd in front of the building, entire. Families, children, elderly, people of all ages. For a moment, Richard thought there was some problem. "What's happening, Dad?" "I don't know." They approached and discovered it was a surprise. The families who had been helped by the association had organized a tribute, a public thank you for the work they had done. Mrs. Carroll, one of the first to be helped, approached with a bouquet of flowers. "Mr. Anthony, Richard, you have no idea the good you've done for so many families." "It's true," added Mr. John, who reconciled with his 3 children after 2 years of no contact. "You saved my family." "We just facilitated the reunion," Anthony replied, always modest. "The love was already there. It just needed a little push." A girl about 8 years old approached, shyly, and handed Anthony a drawing. It was a house with 2 figures at the door, an older man and a younger man, holding hands, smiling. "It's you 2, the girl explained. "My grandma said you helped her make up with my dad." Anthony knelt down, getting to the child's height. "And are you all doing well now?" "Yes, Dad now goes to Grandma's house every Sunday, and she comes to our house too." "That's good, little one." The moment was touching, but also uncomfortable for father and son, who had never sought this kind of public recognition. They preferred quiet work, discreet results, the intimate satisfaction of making a difference without fanfare. "Everyone," Richard said, trying to end the tribute warmly, "we are very touched by all this. But the important thing isn't for you to thank us. The important thing is for you to stay united, taking care of each other." "That's right," Anthony agreed. "Family is like a little plant. You need to water it every day, or it withers." Everyone laughed, agreed, and gradually said their goodbyes. In the end, only father and son remained, alone in front of the association's small headquarters. "I never imagined our story would lead to all this," Richard reflected. "Neither did I, son. When I was on the street, scavenging for food in the trash, I never thought I'd be here one day, helping other families find each other. What if none of that had happened? If Lydia hadn't appeared, if I hadn't traveled? Oh, son, there's no point thinking about what could have been. We only have what is, and what is very good." They walked back home slowly, observing the city in the late Sunday afternoon. Couples strolling, families returning from the park, life happening at a leisurely pace, without rush. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "You always can." "Do you forgive me? Truly, from the bottom of your heart?" Anthony stopped walking, turned to his son. "Richard, listen. There's nothing to forgive. Never was. You're my son, I love you. What's past is past. What matters is now. But I failed you. I abandoned you when you needed me most. You were living your life, and even far away, even without knowing, you never stopped being my son. Love doesn't disappear, son. It might be a little hidden, a little forgotten, but it doesn't disappear. How can you be so sure? Because when you saw me on that street, you stopped. You could have kept going, pretended you didn't see me. But you stopped. That's love, Richard. That's a son who loves his father." They arrived home as the sun was setting. The balcony was bathed in golden afternoon light. His father's plants swayed gently in the breeze. It was a moment of perfect peace, of completeness. "You know what I discovered, Dad?" "What?" "That we don't need to be perfect to be a good family. We just need to be present." "That's true. Presence is the most expensive gift there is, and it's free." That night, while his father watched television in the living room, Richard stayed on the balcony writing. It started as a report on the association, but turned into a kind of memoir, an attempt to record everything he had learned over the past year. He wrote about the day he found his father in the trash and realized that he himself was the one being stirred inside. He wrote about the discovery that love has no expiration date, that family is a daily choice, that presence is worth more than presence. He wrote about the transformation of pain into healing, of error into learning, of loss into reunion. He wrote about Lydia, about the other victims, about all the families they had helped reunite. But mainly, he wrote about his father, about the dignity of a man who went hungry but didn't lose his kindness, about the generosity of someone who was betrayed but didn't become bitter, about the wisdom of someone who lost everything and discovered he had the essential. When he finished, he took the text for his father to read. "What do you think, Dad?" Anthony read in silence, his glasses slipping down his nose, his expression concentrated. When he finished, his eyes were moist. "It's beautiful, son. Very beautiful. Do you think it can help other families?" "I think so. Sometimes you need to read someone else's story to understand your own. Then I'll publish it. Yes, publish it, and make it very clear. At the end, it's never too late to start over." They stayed there sitting on the balcony, watching the night arrive. There was no rush, no agenda, nothing urgent to resolve. Just the present moment, their mutual presence, the certainty that they were where they needed to be. "Dad?" "Yes, son." "Thank you." "For what?" "For waiting for me. For believing in me even when I didn't believe in you." "Son, a father always waits. It's a father's nature. We might die waiting, but we never give up. And now we live, one day at a time, one family. At a time, one bridge at a time. The city slept around them, but there, on the balcony of an apartment transformed into a home, father and son remained awake, savoring the most difficult and simplest conquest in the world, being together. The man who once set out to conquer the universe discovered that the greatest conquest was just a phone call away. And the father who was lost in his own loneliness found in his son's love the strength to rebuild himself and help others do the same. There is no happier ending than this. Two people who love each other, discovering that they don't need to be perfect to form a perfect family. They just need to be present and to promise every day not to let love turn into absence. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.